Just a couple of weeks ago, I went home to the house that my parents brought me home to when I was born. And I was with my parents, as a matter of fact. It's in a little mill village in South Carolina. And this little two-room house in the mill village. And while we were standing there together with my parents, I remember just right up the street is where my grandparents lived. And my grandmother, who I love dearly, helped raise me. When my parents were working, she'd take care of me, feed me, cook for me. And I still remember vividly her cooking, having her apron on. She'd finish feeding us, and then she would make her way over to the mill to work her shift. Then she'd come back home. And my grandfather, who was partially paralyzed, was doing the same thing. He had to sort of drag his leg to get over to the mill. But he'd get over to the mill. He usually worked the third shift. And he'd come back early in the morning. Sometimes we would wait for him and have breakfast for him when he came home. And my dad, in many ways, followed in their footsteps. Because as Elizabeth said, he did spend 36 years going into that mill every day. 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week. Sometimes 10, 12 hours a day. Hard, tedious work. Here's the question. Why did he do it? Why did my grandparents do it? Why did your parents do it? Why did your grandparents do it? Why did they work and suffer and sacrifice for you? Here's why they did it. They did it so that you could have a better life. They did it to make sure that they left America better than they found it. And that is the great moral responsibility that all of us have, including our generation. We carry that responsibility today, to leave our children a better life than we've had. And we are faced with extraordinary obstacles to make certain that we do that we leave America better, that we leave the world better, that our kids have the kind of opportunities and chances that they ought to have in America, in the kind of America that all of us believe in. That's what the promise of America is. It is at the heart and soul of what makes this country what it is today. But what are the obstacles? What are the challenges we face? Well, there are lots of them. And one of them is that corporate power, and in some cases corporate greed, have literally taken over the government. And you look at what's happening, and they infiltrate everything that's going on. Everything. Think about this with me for a second. Why don't we have universal health care? We don't have it because of drug companies, insurance companies, and their lobbyists. It's that simple. Why do we have that mess of a Medicare prescription drug law that we have? I know why. Because the drug company lobbyists wrote the thing. That's why. Why do we have trade policies like NAFTA, CAFTA, that have cost America millions of jobs, only to pad the profits of big multinational corporations? Why do we have a bunch of paid mercenaries roaming around in Iraq, working for Blackwater, making 10 times what our men and women in uniform are making? Why? Why does Halliburton get billion-dollar no-bid contracts in Iraq? Why do we have a tax policy in America that continues to give big tax breaks to the richest Americans and the biggest corporations in America? We actually have a tax break in our tax code that gives a tax break to American companies that are picking up, leaving America, and taking jobs overseas. This is insanity. Why is America not taking the lead globally to attack the crisis of global warming? It's simple. Oil companies, power companies, gas companies. Look, this is not rocket science. I mean, if we want to meet our moral responsibility to our children, if we want to make sure that the promise of America is available to our children, to our grandchildren, if we want to make certain that we leave this country that we all love to our soul better than we found it, then we're going to have to be willing to stand up to these people. It's going to take a fight. And I'll be the first to tell you, I don't think they're going to be nice about this. I don't. And one other thing. I want to be really clear about something. I'm not talking about going to Washington and fighting with politicians. I'm not any more interested in that than you are. As President of the United States, I will work with the leaders in the Congress to get things done. But I will stand up in the proud tradition of great American presidents like Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, Harry Truman, men who said, that it is not right in the United States of America for the power in this democracy to rest in the hands of a few. That is not America. That is not the country that we believe in. We're a better country than that. That's not democracy. And I do take this personally. I admit it. You know, you can tell this by listening to me. This comes from right here in my gut. I met a man, 51 years old a few months ago. His name was James Lowe. James was born, he told me his whole story, born with a cleft palate. Because he had a cleft palate, he wasn't able to speak. Could have been fixed with a simple operation, but he had no health care coverage. And because he had no health care coverage, he couldn't get that operation. Somebody finally fixed his cleft palate voluntarily. Here's the problem. They fixed it when he was 50 years old. James Lowe lived 5 decades in America, not able to speak because he had no health care coverage. And he was so grateful and gracious and kind, reminded me so much of all the men and women I grew up with who worked in the mill. But I didn't feel that way. I listened to his story and I thought to myself, how long are we going to let insurance companies and drug companies and their lobbyists run this country? America doesn't belong to them. America belongs to us. James Lowe finally got his voice back. Isn't it time for you to get your voice back? That's what this election is about. And we have such important work to do. I'm going to take questions from you in a few minutes, and I know we're going to get into some of these things. But we desperately need universal health care. We desperately need to transform the way we produce and use energy in America. We desperately need a fair tax system. We need trade policy that's both economically fair and moral. We desperately need to end this mess of a war in Iraq and make sure we stop Bush and Cheney from going to war in Iran. We have lots of work to do. But the starting place is to make this democracy, to make this country work for everybody. You know, what's happening in America today is this. The biggest corporations have record profits. ExxonMobil, record profits last year. Record profits. The CEO of the largest health insurance company in America made hundreds of millions of dollars last year. Hundreds of millions of dollars. All this is going on at the same time that we have 47 million people in this country who, if they wake up in the middle of the night with a sick child, are going to have to go to the emergency room and beg for health care. All this going on at the same time that we have 37 million people who wake up every single day worried about feeding and clothing their children and living in poverty. All this going on at exactly the same time that last year 35 million Americans, roughly the population of California, went hungry in America. 35 million. And while profits for corporations are soaring and the richest Americans are getting richer, the concentration of wealth is getting greater and greater and greater. The top 1% percentage of the overall nation's income has doubled in the last 25 years. Doubled. All that while tonight 200,000 men and women who wore the uniform of the United States of America, veterans, will go to sleep under bridges and on grates. Yeah, I take this personally. I think the United States of America, the country that I'm in love with, that has been so good to me, I think we're better than that. I think our country is so much better than that. And I think we have such an opportunity in front of us. We do. We do. Because every single time we speak up and stand up for James Lowe and the millions like him who live in the darkness, completely forgotten by Washington and this government, every time we do it, America rises. Every single time that we speak up for 47 million people in this country who have no health care coverage, America rises. Every time we, us, have a little backbone and speak up for 35 million people who went hungry in the richest nation on the planet last year, America rises.